Hi, I'm WD Editor-in-Chief Amy Jones alongside WD Editor Michael Woodson. Today we will be talking with two of our favorite authors about vacation reads. We're thrilled to welcome novelist Stephen Rowley and novelist and WD Editor-at-Large Jessica Strawser. Would each of you mind introducing yourself and sharing a little bit about your most recent book? Stephen, maybe you can go first.
Sure. I'm Stephen Rowley. I'm the author of three novels, Lily and the Octopus, the editor, and most recently, The Guncle, which just came out in paperback last month, which is a story about Patrick O'Hara, a sort of semi-retired television star living a reclusive life in the California desert when he is tasked with taking in his young niece and nephew for the summer after a family tragedy, which leads to a season of healing for all three of them.
And it had the best trailer ever. The best book trailer I've ever seen.
Yeah, I summoned my inner Reese Witherspoon, my inner Elle Woods, and did a spoof of her Harvard video application for from Legally Blonde to launch the book. But yeah, I had a lot of fun doing that.
No, I'm going to have to look that up. I haven't seen that.
It puts all other book trailers ever made to shame.
Okay.
For not worthy. And I'm Jessica Strawser. I came up as editorial director at Writer's Digest for many years, and now I'm a full-time novelist. I'm an author of 5 novels. I have a new paperback out this year for A Million Reasons Why, which came out in hardcover last year, but you might have missed it because we were in lockdown still. There was a pandemic on. And my new novel is called The Next Thing You Know. And it is the story of an end-of-life doula who takes on a cult favorite musician as a client. And he is grappling with physically losing the ability to play his guitar. And it's about the connection that forms between the two of them. And it was just named People Magazine Best New Book in April. So that was really exciting.
I saw that, yeah.
Oh, congratulations. That's awesome.
Thanks.
So before we recorded this, we had a very long editor's chat for the podcast about vacation reads and how we decide what books we're going to take on vacation. And the gist of it was we pick books from our TBR piles that we are really, really excited about and haven't had dedicated time to read because of work and life. And so in a way, they're books that we're fairly certain we're fairly convinced ahead of time that we are going to enjoy, so they have earned that spot in our luggage. What do you think of when you think of vacation reads? Is it a genre or a style of writing or something else entirely?
It's purely by weight of the book. If it's 800 pages, it's not going to fit in my carry-on. I'm sorry. No, I still love reading hard copies of books, but I bought, finally, my husband actually got me a Kindle as a gift. Because I truly was like going on tour, like what book should I bring with me or on vacation based on how difficult they would be to lug around, with me. So now I have both. I read it paper at home and when I travel, other considerations can come into play.
I think for me, vacation reading, if it's a road trip, usually starts in the car too on an audiobook. I almost always have an audiobook going and either a print book or a book on my Kindle going. And I agree with what you said, Amy. I think, for me, when I typically read, it's like before I go to bed each night, just for a little bit, just depending on how much time I have. It's very often I read every day, but very often it's only for maybe 20 minutes. And for me, vacation is a time where you have time to really sink in and read for hours at a stretch, on the beach or on a balcony with a view somewhere or somewhere with a view. So I love if it's a book that I've been looking forward to for a long time, something that feels like a reward when you finally get on that trip you've been looking forward to. But I also sometimes think about how there are some people who really only read on vacation. I think for some people, the book they take on vacation might be the only book that they read all year, which is very different from my experience. But I think some people save up like the only books they're going to read that year, and that's what they take with them.
Yeah, I think,
That's
the more serious answer for me too is that something that I want to read for pure joy. That, I love my job, I love every aspect of it, but there's a lot of reading that is part of it
Yeah.
also, whether it's done for research or professional courtesy. I'm honored when, asked to blurb, a book for another writer, or just having a connect, meeting another writer at a festival, or virtually now the past couple of years, but like, when we used to go to festivals in person and, sometimes I would want to be like, oh, could we have a pact of non-aggression? Like you don't read my book, I won't have to read your book. We could just be friends. But the rare occasions for me when I get to just go into a bookstore and pick up something purely because it spoke to something in my heart and I'm excited to read it, that's what usually vacation reading brings to mind for me.
Oh yeah, I will save up books sometimes. If I know I've got a vacation coming up, I will save a nice stack of books. And I'm actually leaving on Friday for a vacation, and I've already started my stack of books that I'm looking forward to that I'm going to take with me. And this one is a road trip, so fitting it in my luggage is not a concern on this one.
All right. Just throw it into the car. I have really positive associations with like vacation reads or vacation reading, especially like when you think about going on like a beach vacation and I just see all of these other people who are also on vacation who are also reading, and it just feels like this weird shared experience that we're doing separately but together. And so I just wanted to know, what is your association with reading and vacation, especially because you're, like you said, Stephen, your lives are really in and around books, both reading and writing them. Like, do you have any memories particularly of reading a good book while on vacation?
Yeah, I think I will take a swing at other genres sometimes too. Like I do agree with Amy. Like I will save something that I absolutely want to immerse myself with for the time that I do. That I know will benefit from me not having to pick it up and put it down 100 times. That I can really sort of get lost in for the day, whether it's by a pool or on the beach or whatnot. So definitely, big immersive novels. I love that. But I remember flying to Hawaii soon after. Gillian Flynn's Gone Girl came out, and it was like everybody was, and I spotted like several other people on the plane reading it too.
Right.
And a friend of mine was a couple, she was on the same flight, a couple rows behind me, and she was like, "You wait till you get to the twist. Wait till you get to the twist." And I got to the twist like an hour before we landed, and I stood up in my seat and turned around and like was like snapping to get her attention, like I got to the twist. But I just remember that moment very carefully. But like reading something, thrillers are not a genre I generally read at home. I'm more sort of contemporary. Fiction that's more sort of like about human relationships and whatnot. So that I just remember it being like a really exciting moment, to being
Yeah.
surprised or being surprised at being surprised was a
Totally.
really fun moment.
I agree. There's something about picking up something that's a little bit different from what you normally read that just feels more like a break. I don't know what it is, but I'm the same way where I read a lot of mainstream contemporary fiction, book club fiction, and sometimes I'll just be drawn to something a little bit different for vacation. I just read, I actually listened to on my last trip, Finley Donovan is Killing It, which is more of a caper. It's a mystery, but it's kind of like this fun romp. It's so meta. It's about this novelist who she's in a Panera talking with her agent about her plot problems of how she wants to do her murder a little bit differently in her next mystery. And someone overhears her, mistakes her for a contract killer, and tries to hire her to kill her husband. And hilarity ensues from there because the novelist, of course, cannot pass up a good story of trying to figure out why she has no intention of actually taking the contract job, but she's curious what's so terrible about this woman's husband that she wants to have him killed. So, it's just at some point you realize I'm just completely suspending my belief in this story.
Totally.
And it's just so much fun. And I think some of that is just that it feels that much more fresh and different to listen to. Yeah.
Sometimes I'm susceptible to a cover too. Like I just picked up
Oh,
The Swimmers
Hmm.
by Julia Otsuka just because it has that beautiful pool blue kind of swimming pool blue cover, and I was like, oh, this is something I absolutely need to read while sitting by a pool. So um, yeah, I don't. I think as a writer sometimes we don't want to give into the power that covers can have, but absolutely, and I'm sitting, on the other side of this now too, because the Gunkel has such a joyous, bright, summery
beautiful cover.
cover as well that I know has attracted people to the book. So I'm like, I had to give that some real thought and realize like, oh yeah, covers actually do speak to us sometimes, especially I think when it comes to vacation reading.
So you mentioned the cover of your book, and it being so bright and summery, and it has a pool in it. So do either of you consider your own books to be vacation reads?
That's a good question. I would say yes, but I also consider the cover. To the extent that I've always been obsessed with sort of the magical caregiver genre of stories. So the Gonko was very much inspired by Auntie Mame, the Patrick Dennis novel from the mid 50s, and then I've always loved Mary Poppins or Maria from The Sound of Music and
Yeah.
all this stuff. And so to the extent that this is falls into that category a little bit, I do think of the cover as a bit of Mary Poppins sort of spoonful of sugar, because the story it looks like a bright, fun vacation read, and hopefully it is. I do think the book is very funny as well, but it has at its heart it's a book about grief as well. And so I think that I do think of that as a vacation read, but I don't mind sneaking in what's hopefully a little bit of substance to someone's
Yeah.
beach read as well. But I promise you will laugh, but I think readers have been surprised by the depth of emotion in the book as well. But I think sometimes we pick a vacation destination thinking we're going to do these fun things, and it's something unexpected that will make the vacation really stand out, or something that we really remember. And hopefully, the book is sort of mirrors that a little bit.
I feel the same. I mean, I always like books with substance, regardless of when I'm reading them. But I think there's something about a character in a novel who just kind of feels like somebody you want to spend time with, somebody who's really interesting, just like meeting this interesting new person who thinks differently from the way that you think. And I try to write characters like that. I think in my new book, The Next Thing You Know, the main character is, I mean, Nova. She's recently walked out on her entire life and left behind everything that's familiar to her, her hometown, her job, her boyfriend, and done this 180 and decided to become an end of life doula and help these people who've gotten a rough diagnosis or who are at the end of their lives, kind of come to terms and whatever that means to them. So, she comes at them like, what do you want to do with the time you have left? And let's do it. And she's got this kind of interestingly positive, upbeat attitude. That's not what you would expect. And she's also a real risk taker and very different from me. So I think I like spending time with somebody who's, different from the people who I know in real life and learning about something new on a trip.
Also, I would 1,000% read that on vacation, by the way, because I think there's no better time to reflect on who we are. Are we finding joy in life? Are we doing what we, than on vacation? Are we living up to our full potential? I'm not afraid of reading about grieving or dying while on vacation, because it reminds me the importance of taking vacation as well, that we are only here for a limited amount of time. And so there is something nice about a book like that, Jessica, that I really think like under scores the need for vacation in a little way. And so it's a really lovely time to reflect on our lives and make sure we're living the lives that we want to in the best way we can.
That is exactly what it's about. And I really appreciate you saying that. Thank you.
I, what you both are saying right now is really it's really resonating with me, because you both write books that are like super multifaceted and wonderfully difficult to categorize or put into any genre. Like I've laughed out loud at both of your books and like bawled into oblivion reading both of your books, the same book, like one book, which is, I think, an important distinction because people tend to think of vacation reads as exclusively light fare, and there's nothing wrong with that. But from my experience, it's not necessarily true. And what you're saying, Stephen and Jessica, that's also true for you as well. So I'm curious if you could talk just a little bit from like a craft perspective, how you manage balancing multiple tones in one book that you're writing, how you navigate writing sort of both funny and emotional scenes without one maybe threatening to take over.
Yeah, Jessica, I'm curious to your take. Here, this is what's so great about discussions like this, because writing a novel, can often feel like a very solitary endeavor.
Yeah.
And so when I get to talk to someone else about craft, particularly something similar to what I do, and I do think it's the most complicated part of what I do, and I put in a lot of thought. It's sometimes very surgical, even the
Right.
precision in which you go. If you have one joke too many in a scene, it can really throw off the balance of, the emotional balance of what the story you're trying to tell. And likewise, if you go too long without allowing the reader to take a breath through a laugh or, a joke or a lighter moment, that it can also throw off the balance of what you're trying to do in another direction. So it's something that I work, incredibly hard at. But these are my favorite stories. So if I can laugh and cry in the same book, I feel like that's just the wonderful reflection of life and how life truly is.
Absolutely. I think that's where I do pay a lot of attention to kind of the emotional journey that you're taking through a book. And I think that's where I really lean into my supporting cast to kind of come on and, bring a little, especially if one character is going through a hard time, have somebody else come in and bring in a little comic relief or, shake things up a little or make them take a break and go do something, that's away from everything else. And I usually do write from multiple points of view. And, so I'm very aware of one character's perspective having a different, general arc and tone from another one, and the balance, between them all. Nobody wants to write anything that, like Stephen said, even if, it's touching on a big issue like grief or coming to terms with, Mason, and the next thing you know, it was interesting getting in the mind of a different sort of artist, a different sort of creative person who can't do the thing that brings him joy anymore. He doesn't need a lesson in how to go out and live life to the fullest. He's just trying to figure out how to do it without the main thing that brings him joy anymore. And his perspective is very different from the perspective of the person who's trying to, get through to him and help be a support to him and help kind of guide him through this. So, I carefully choose the point of view characters with that in mind as well.
So Michael mentioned that he has very positive connotations with the idea of vacation reads, and I do as well. And as we've sort of talked this through a little bit, I might know the answer to this question. But, maybe not all writers would feel the same way and have those positive thoughts about vacation reads. So how do you, feel free to be honest here, it won't hurt our feelings. How do you feel about us considering your books to be vacation reads?
Listen, I'm honored. As I said, Jessica really, nailed it. But I think, sometimes this is the only chance that people have to read. And, it really is then an honor, if someone chose a book of mine to bring with them. And yes, sometimes I get angry messages. I think I'm a funny person, but I've been known for writing tearjerkers also. And so I get angry messages from people that you made me cry on a beach or cry on a plane or in an airport. Like, how dare you? So sorry, but also I would be thrilled. I'm very aware that people have busy lives and that people don't read as much fiction, particularly as we all do. And so when they pick a book of yours for their limited reading time, it's an honor whether you're doing it sitting at home or taking that on vacation with you.
That's the thing. I mean, I totally know why you're asking, Amy. I think once in a while there will be some sort of conversation that blows up, usually on Twitter, where
Yes.
maybe somebody will call a book a beach read, or a book will make a list of the top beach reads, and then somebody will get mad about that and say, well, I wouldn't consider my book a beach read.
Right.
You know, my book is more serious than that. And to me, it's just, I mean, this is going to sound like I'm oversimplifying, but if you want to read my book, I don't care what you call it. I don't care where you read it. I mean, I should be so lucky as to trifle with, you know, where you want to read my book. You know, like Stephen said, that's an honor if your story is the one that people want to take with them, regardless of why. If it's because they want to read something that makes them feel something, if it's because they want to read about something that makes them think, if it's because they want to read about something that makes them helps them escape into a life that's different from their own, or distracts them from what's going on. I would never take offense to that, and the idea that anyone would is honestly ridiculous to me. I just think that those kind of discussions get super overblown.
Yeah, it is a little silly to look down at, you know, either someone for having commercial taste or someone thinking you are commercial. Like, there's nothing wrong with that at all. I might try to sneak in something literary in this commercial story that I'm trying to tell, but that's, you know, I consider that my job, and that's something I'm doing for me, and then first, and then for the reader second. But I would never, it would never take offense at someone thinking that something I wrote would be a good time, or might be an easy read, and I would rather pleasantly surprise them with something of a little more substance. But I would never, you know, if they go into that from the outset, then I have no problem with that whatsoever.
Just as an aside, I honestly hadn't thought about the idea that the truth in that a lot of people only have time to read while they're on vacation, Jessica. That's just such a good point. And it also feels like when I would say most of my book recommendations most naturally when I'm on vacation, because I'm seeing so many other people reading, and I know that they're reading those books intentionally because they brought them with them from home. So I think I agree with you, and I love that this is the conversation we're having, because like your books, vacation reads and beach reads are like wonderfully diverse and can cover any multitude of genres or plots that someone would maybe want to be reading.
Yeah.
And then I get to, because I'm seeing someone else reading.
I think it's hilarious. You know, Emily Henry is a genius, leaned into it, wrote a book called Beach Read. I'm like,
Right?
damn it, why didn't I think of that? Like, you know, and she's a wonderful writer too. So it's not, you know, you can, it was a very smart way to try to chase a trend in a little bit, and then hopefully write something that's surprising too. So bravo for her for just going for it.
Yeah.
It's like when people, I know this happens to romance writers a lot, when people will pick up a book and they'll call it a guilty pleasure. Like, well, I picked this up as a guilty pleasure. Well, why is there guilt?
Right?
You know,
If you find pleasure in it, absolutely. Yeah. Own it.
Yeah.
Enjoy it.
Yes. I firmly believe, and there's no such thing as guilty
Agreed.
pleasures.
Agreed.
Yeah, especially now. I mean, the world is a pretty heavy place right now. If something is calling to you to pick it up and read it, or bringing you joy, you know, no guilt-free. And yeah, I think as an author, I visit with a lot of book clubs, and so I'm very aware of how little a lot of people read. Very often when I will show up at a book club, they'll say, oh my gosh, we all actually read it this time. Like, usually even people who are in a book club, life gets away from them. You know, half the people in the room just showed up to drink the wine that night because they didn't get to their, you know, one title that month. So I am very aware that, there are a lot of people who don't read nearly as much, and they want to pick up my book.
Yeah. I've been guilty of rereading things on vacation too, because the world is like a hellfire right now. And it does, if you find comfort in knowing there's not going to be danger in this, you know, I have I'm on deadline for a new book right now. And so, you know, the writing process is consuming me, but I have reread the Heartstopper graphic novels, a redacted number of times right now, because they just bring me joy. It's a graphic novel. I can read them quickly, you know, like, sometimes I feel guilty, like I should be reading something else because I know what's going to happen, but it brings me joy at the same time. So, it is what it is.
That's actually one of Amy's stipulations for bringing books on her vacation.
Yes, I have a very long process for choosing which books I'm going to take. It's like a 3 or 4 step process, but it always includes a book that I've read before that I know I love. Because I don't often have time to reread in regular life because, again, reading for work, business reasons. And so getting to reread something that I love and that I know I'm going to enjoy is it's pleasurable to be able to do that, to have that kind of
Yeah, it's
luxury.
like planning a vacation with a friend, with a good friend.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Those characters that you want to
like
revisit.
I feel like that's such a lost luxury. That's so nostalgic to me too, because luxury is maybe the wrong word, but everything is so accessible now. I mean, I can pick up my phone and download a new book instantly from where I'm sitting, and I can do it from the library app and not even have to pay for it necessarily. But like when I was first learning to love books, when I was a teenager and even younger than that, I don't think there was a book on my shelf that I hadn't read 5 or 6 times. I mean, if my mom couldn't get me to the library that day, or if I got a cold and I had already blown through all the new stuff that I picked up, I would literally just read. I mean, everything on my shelf, I had literally probably read 5 or 6 times. I would reread everything.
Yeah.
And now, now I don't think we do that because it's so easy to get something new. I don't even really think about. I think that's so smart, Amy. I don't think about doing that as often. We rewatch the same movies every single holiday season. Sometimes we'll put on, like an old episode of Friends or Seinfeld, a show we've seen a billion times just for comfort if we want something on in the background. But we don't think as much anymore as we used to. At least I don't, about picking up books that we've already read. I think that's so smart.
Yeah, particularly because we can grow as readers as well. I recently just reread on a trip The Amazing Adventures of Cavalier and Clay because it was a book that meant so much to me 20 years ago. And I wanted to see, has the book changed in my memory? Does it live up to my memory? Have I changed as a reader? Have I grown as a person? Like, what will it say to me today? And I'm, thrilled to say I loved it just as much. But that was a deliberate decision to say, like, oh, I'm going to actually read this 600-page book again. But it really taught me something about myself a little bit too, which is great.
Yeah. So I think for me, setting and plot really play a big role in what I might consider a vacation read or a book that's perfect to bring on vacation. Stephen, particularly with the Guncle, I instantly wanted to be in Palm Springs with you and have the time of my life. The setting was so integral to the reading experience of the Guncle. And Jessica, your books have that quality where there's a moment when you're reading it and you know that I'm not moving from this spot until I finish this book. And what better place to do that than on vacation? Because as we've been talking about, life gets in the way and you can only read in like 15-minute, 20-minute increments. So for readers, we have that hook. But I'm curious as authors, what for you is that hook? Either in writing these books, like what was the moment of no turning back for you? And what are the hooks that you look for in your own reading time?
Well, I do like what you say about setting, and particularly in the Guncle, Palm Springs plays such a huge role. I do love books where setting is sometimes, an unspoken character in a way, and you can be so, immersed. I'm thinking like Beautiful Ruins, Jess Walter, something, like I want to be transported to Italy, or I want to, Sarah Winman's Still Life, another book, that made me be thinking of Italy. Recently. So sometimes like setting is so important to the idea of a vacation or a beach read. And that may have been a subconscious thing, but now that you mention it, that's absolutely, I think something I look for, even if it's not the trip that I'm on, it can be like aspirational for the idea of planning the next vacation.
Sure.
I feel like I pay more attention to that, like before and after. I mean, if you're on a beach and you look around, like half the people have books with a beach on the cover, it seems like.
Sure.
But I'm there So I don't feel like I need to escape there in the story necessarily.
Sure.
I don't feel like I need to sink. But after I get home, when I'm wishing I could go back, that's when I will sometimes pick up those books, which is kind of interesting. Or before I go, when I'm looking forward to the trip, that kind of escapist. Doesn't have to be a beach, like trip to Italy, a book that takes place in the mountains somewhere, just the novelty of that kind of story that transports you. But I don't feel like I look for that as much when I'm actually on the beach, which is interesting. I think for me, it really is the novelty and the idea of like the book is a reward that you've been looking forward to.
Yeah.
I very often will have a pre-order that comes in like the day before I leave. That's something that I've been waiting for it to come out if I can time it right. And there's that like anxiety that if the book doesn't arrive the day it's supposed to in the mail, you're not going to have it before you go, like this comes out the Tuesday before I leave. So for me, I think it's more, to the idea of something that I've really been looking forward to reading.
Yeah. And I've reverse engineered this, by the way. I have traveled to Italy, and I remember coming home and I'm like, I just want to read Patricia Highsmith novels or something, because there was something about the feeling of that trip that I just wanted to continue, even though I was back home. So I'm like, I can escape back into my vacation by reading specific books once I get home.
Yeah, I think that's what I do. Honestly, I pay more attention to setting after I'm back home because I'm so sad that I'm not going to leave again for a while.
Well, Jessica, your debut, Almost Missed You, starts on vacation.
It doesn't go well, though.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's spoiler free here, but it immediately it's kind of
it's not a spoiler. Yeah, it's about a woman who's on her. So the opening scene of the book is a woman who is on vacation with her husband and her young son, and he sets her up on the beach with like a pina colada and an umbrella, tells her to relax while he handles their son's nap for the day, and then abducts her son. When she goes up to the hotel room, they're both gone. They're packed up and they're gone, and everything they brought with them is completely, so that begins with a vacation gone wrong. Yeah, that's not an image you necessarily want to escape back into. But
But Michael, to circle back to your question, I think, I'm not a plot heavy writer. I am much more focused on relationships and character and stuff like that. So I do agree with, something Jessica said earlier, like wanting to spend time with this particular character that if I'm reading on vacation or whatnot, character is something that's so important to me. And I do try to, in my own writing, give, a hook to a character early on that you are wanting to go along for this ride, and I do think like the highest compliment that I get with the Gunkel is like, I wish Patrick were my Gunkel, or I wish he were my best friend, or, so many wonderful things about the character, even though he's not, perfect in nearly any way, because writing books about perfect people who behave perfectly all the time is not great reading. But so even though he can be a little frustrating, the fact that people still love him, it's like, I'm not detached from reality, but for like a half a second, I do almost want to like try to text him and be like, people are really enjoying you, because he's so, he's so real to me.
I think the biggest compliment for me is if somebody says, I like to write books that invite readers to sort of participate in the story and wonder, what would I do if I was in this situation? This is a very real thing that feels very authentic, like this could happen. And if it did happen, what would I do? What would I do if I was in this character's shoes? What would I do if I was in this character's shoes? And usually when I'm writing my way through that, I don't necessarily know. I know maybe how it's going to end, but I haven't really thought through, all the nuances. And the biggest compliment for me is if a reader emails or posts a message on one of my pages and says, I'm still thinking about this. I finished it last night, or I finished it last week. I can't stop thinking about it. I'm still thinking about it. To me, that's the biggest compliment. And I think it feels that way to me when I'm writing it. So when it feels that way to someone else who's reading it too, that's when I feel like, I've done what I set out to do.
There is a scene in A Million Reasons Why that, I read that book as an advanced digital copy from your publisher. But there's a scene from that book that still lives in my mind, and I can picture it viscerally, and the feelings that I had when I read it. And like Michael said, those are the moments where you're not going to stop reading. Absolutely. Unless it's going to make me cry. And then I will go somewhere by myself. So I have one last question. I don't know if maybe Michael has another one after this. I'm not sure. But since we were talking a little bit about writing, in thinking about that, the actual act of writing, do your writing habits change when you are on vacation? Do you find yourself to be like particularly prolific or not during or after vacations, seeing as you're working writers and, it's what you do for a job, but perhaps also for enjoyment?
I'm on vacation. If I'm on vacation, I'm not writing. And if I'm writing, I'm not on vacation.
Yeah.
Okay.
I would agree with that.
I'm on a trip
and
I'm writing on the trip,
It's hard to turn off though, because I do think like writing, I always think of it as an input-output endeavor. And one of the hardest parts about the past 2 years is we've lived through this pandemic of different variations of quarantine and not traveling as much as we used to is, sometimes the creative tank feels a little empty. Like I rely on travel and vacation and experience and trying new things and tasting new things and seeing new things to refill and re-inspire, myself creatively. It's all those details that you can soak in, that will later make your writing feel very rich and fully realized is that's the part of writing that you can do sort of subconsciously while traveling. It's just observing and experiencing. And so
I know a lot of writers do write on vacation. They'll post about it. Woke up this morning, saw the sunrise, got my 1,000 words. And it is hard to stop if you're in the middle of a project. I usually try to time things so that which I'm not going to be able to do that this year, but I will often try to time things where I'm really working overtime to try to get to the end of a draft or something before I go. That's the best, when you kind of need that distance from the project anyway. And so you actually need to be taking a break and turning off from it, and you can give yourself permission to do it.
Yeah. I think like Ellen Hildebrand is very famous for doing, like she'll go to a Caribbean island and she writes longhand and she'll post Instagram photos of a stack of legal notebooks that are filled with it that she wrote on the beach itself. And I'm like, but I guess that's why she's written 30 books and I've written 3, so it's like, but I'm not doing that. I'm sorry. I'm not writing with sticky suntan hands and I'm just not doing it. I'm going to enjoy the beach. So.
Well, plus I think when she does that, I think she's there for like a month or two.
Exactly. It's not her only 1 week a year.
If I was somewhere for a month or two, yeah, I know. For me, it's like 1 week. So, but I also, it's funny, I just got back from my first in-person writer's workshop that I've taught at since the before times. And we were kind of talking about, like writing when you go places versus, being open to the world around you. And I always think of this story. When I was writing A Million Reasons Why, I was working on a revision, and, the book is about a woman one of the main characters in the book is a woman with chronic kidney disease who needs a kidney transplant and has just discovered that she has this half sister, but she doesn't want to even let her know she's sick, let alone ask her if she's willing to get tested and be a match. But everyone else who knows her is trying to pressure her to ask this person. So I was actually writing a scene with that character. I was revising a scene with that character, and I had to get this scene done on this flight to Albuquerque. I was flying to keynote this conference at the University of New Mexico. So I have this thing on airplanes where I will usually end up next to like a very chatty little old lady who just wants to chat with me the whole time. And I'm like, okay, I need to like make sure I get the scene done on the plane. So I have my like plan, I have my laptop, I have my headphones, I have my like resting bitch face on. Like, do not talk to me. Of course, it's like this. Can I say that on this podcast? I'm sorry.
Go for it.
So,
yes, absolutely. Yeah.
So sure enough, this little old lady, very sweet little old lady who next to me, and I'm just like noise canceling headphones, laptop. And then, so I get my scene revised. And when they said to put electronics away because we were about to make our descent. I put it away, and she finally started making small talk with me. And it turns out that she had just received a kidney from her daughter-in-law.
Wow.
So
Oh, no way.
I was sitting next to someone who had just been the recipient of a kidney transplant for a 2-hour flight and not speaking to her so I could revive my scene about the kidney patient. So I feel like there's a lesson in that too about like when you're out in the world, when you're going somewhere, when you're traveling, when you're in a new place, when you're meeting new people, if you're so worried about hitting your word count, you might not be open to those experiences, like Stephen said, that are going to, refill the well. I mean, what are the odds?
What are the odds? The universe is
Lessons.
talking to you. Yeah.
Speaking of lessons, to wrap this up, a lot of our listeners are practicing writers, and they are really eager and hungry for writing advice. And what piece of writing advice do you have for the writer who is maybe a little needlessly concerned about how other people might perceive the projects that they're working on? If they're worried that, is this too commercial? Are people going to see this as a beach read, which for whatever reason has a negative connotation for certain people? What do you say to them?
Yeah, we've talked so much about vacation on this podcast, but there's no substitution to doing the work. I mean, we need these vacations because the rest of the year we are butt in chair doing the hard work of writing, and there's no way around that. And part of that is trusting, I think, your own voice a little bit. My first novel is a book called Lily and the Octopus, which is about a man who wakes up one morning and thinks he sees a small octopus affixed to his dog's head. And okay, that's weird, but I knew, inherently, I knew what I was writing about was attachment and how difficult it can be to let go. So it made sense to have like a tentacular kind of metaphor for this book. But I also, if I had worried the whole time that it was too weird or too bizarre or there would be no audience for this book, I never would have been able to finish. And it was the first book that broke through for me. I have other manuscripts that were more commercial, that are sitting on a shelf because they never were able to get me an agent or a publisher. And so I think sometimes you just have to trust that your voice and your storytelling instincts are right and authentic for you. And so that does involve a lot of like putting blinders on and not worrying while you're writing where you fit into a marketplace, because the market will change and writing takes a long time. And I don't, I'm not a fan of people who try to develop a New York Times bestseller based on what the last one was. It's like the books that are truly phenomenon sometimes are because they are so original, they spark the next trend.
I think if you're following the bigger writing advice to write the kind of book that you like to read, which is, you would think is the most basic, but some people really struggle with that. I think you should write the kind of book that you want to read, write the kind of book that you wish you had on your shelf. And if you're doing that, your joy in the writing is going to come through. Your passion for the writing is going to come through. And if you're the audience for that book, you can rest assured that there will be more of an audience for it as well, without worrying too much, without getting in your own way. Worrying too much about what that's going to be.
Yeah,
absolutely. That's fantastic advice from both of you. Well, Stephen, Jessica, thank you both so much for joining us on Writer's Digest Presents. It's been a real pleasure.